TFA fam, what is going on? Hope you're all having a great week 13. We are here to give you the first look at the week 14 waiver wire ads. Kev, before you jump into it, because your Kansas City Chiefs are on Sunday night prime time, once again, I feel like I've been saying this what feels like every week this year. I do just want to say Amon-Ra St. Brown, game-winning touchdown. That's it. Kev, week 14 quarterbacks, what you got?
Yeah, I don't think there's like any must-have, but I think there's a few options here. I think Cam Newton is expected to remain the starter through their bye week. Only rostered 29% of leagues. Gets Atlanta this week. Excellent matchup. The Panthers, like I said, they get the Falcons this week, who ranked 29th at pass DVOA, allow the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks. The Panthers will also have a new offensive coordinator with Matt Rule deciding to move on from Joe Brady. So, this will be a little bit of a new offense. We know Christian McCaffrey's out, so I would expect that means probably Cam Newton runs a little bit more. And so he is supposed to be the buy in a great matchup. So I do like adding him as an option. I know he was terrible the last time we saw him play, but I think this is a good bounce back spot. Much better matchup than what he saw the last time against Miami. Taysom Hill was one I had to look at because he did suffer another finger injury, or I guess re-injured it, but they're saying that he is expected to play through it. They're just going to have a split on there. Rostered only 34% of leagues, gets the Jets this week, completed 19 of 41 for 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 picks, but rushed 11 times for 101 yards. Like I said, he injured that finger. The Jets are ranked 31st in pass DVOA, allow the 9th most fantasy points to quarterback. So it is a really good matchup, and he's going to run the football. We know this. He very well could get Alvin Kamara back for this game as well with a little bit extra time off. So Taysom Hill is a great ad. He's a great fantasy option, not very good real life quarterback, but if he's going to continue to be the starter, he's going to see a lot of rushing opportunities, and it's going to make it really hard not to want to play him every single week. Taylor Heineke next up, 39% roster versus Dallas. Completed 23 of 30 today for 196, 2 touchdowns and one interception against the Raiders. Faces the Dallas defense that does rank 4th in pass DVOA, but they have allowed the 14th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So there is a little bit, they do allow some to quarterbacks there. So Taylor Heineke, if you're going to pinch, has some upside with his legs as well. Not a terrible option. And then from there, Justin Fields is expected to start week 14. Missed the last 2 weeks with a rib injury, and Andy Dalton looked absolutely terrible today. The Packers do allow the 14th most passing yards and the 4th most passing touchdowns. They have also allowed the 4th most rushing yards to quarterbacks, which should bode well for Fields. So it's kind of a slim play against Green Bay on the road, but Justin Fields does bring something with his legs. And if he's going to be the starter here, and maybe possibly they can get Allen Robinson back, Justin Fields was starting to show a little bit of promise before he went down with an injury. Next, last week, not least, I don't really know if I'd want to play Teddy Bridgewater, but they are playing Detroit. They are currently playing right now, obviously. Faces the Lions, who ranked 28th in pass DVOA on the season, and they've done a decent job limiting yards, but allowed the 11th most passing touchdowns at quarterback. So not a super great play for me for Teddy Bridgewater, but if you're absolutely desperate, there are 4 teams on bye this week with the Colts, the Jets, or not the Jets, but the Colts, the Dolphins, and a few other teams. So, and the Eagles, I guess that would be the other option there too as well. They're on bye. So that's all I got at quarterback.
I'll take things over to running back. No priority ads this week, which is a great thing, right? Because that means that we do not have any major injuries. There are some secondary ads that you can look at. Dontrell Hilliard and Deonta Foreman, both those guys are available in. They're only sitting at 40% rostered in ESPN and Yahoo leagues. The reason why I have them here at secondary ads and not must ads or priority ads, one, it's the Titans offense. I don't really trust it all that much. Both these running backs did have 100 rushing yards, over 100 rushing yards in the last game they played, but I just don't know what to expect out of this backfield. I do think Foreman is the guy that I would want to have here, but going forward, they do get a nice matchup next week against Jacksonville, but then it's Pittsburgh, San Fran, and Miami through the playoffs. So not a great setup here for them. It's not awful, but that's why I have them over here at secondary ads. The other name to watch, obviously, we don't know what he has done this week yet because he doesn't play until tomorrow, and that is Matt Breida. He definitely has provided a spark for this backfield, and being tied to one of the better offenses in the league, you definitely want to have pieces of that. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Breida takes over this backfield because, Moss hasn't done much. Singletary hasn't done much either. So if Breida can stay healthy and start to get more involved, we've seen him be very efficient with the limited touches that he has gotten so far. So he is a good option as well. And then just a couple stashes, some guys to keep in mind for some handcuff purposes as well. Looking at Khalil Herbert, Sony Michel, Latavius Murray, guys like that you can look at to plug in this week. Because like I said, it's not great for running back ads. Some other guys to keep in mind: Nyheim Hines, Devontae Booker, and Ronald Jones would be some other handcuff stashes to pay attention to. But that is all I got at running back. Kev, does wide receiver look any better?
I do want to say I think one player you left off the list that I think has some interest would be Rashad Penny. He actually looked really good today. He actually touched the ball 11 times for 62 yards, and I felt like he looked pretty explosive. We've been waiting for him to actually break out and actually do something, but Rashad Penny, maybe this is the opportunity he finally gets to actually take over this backfield. Alex Collins was actually inactive this week, and so Rashad Penny, they've been kind of talking him up, but Rashad Penny is somebody that I would look to add as maybe a stash or possibly somebody you could flex, especially with 4 teams on bye in week 14. So he is somebody that I did want to add to the list. I know some other people may be concerned about Miles Sanders. He did leave the game, but with them being on bye, and Miles Sanders even said after the game he should be good to go for once they come off their bye in week 15. So you don't really have to worry about that. So I did just want to throw those couple of things in there. Over at wide receiver, we talked about it last week. We're going to talk about it again this week. Russell Gage, 34% rostered. In Yahoo leagues and ESPN. He had 11 receptions on 12 targets. He had a 29% target share for 130 yards and 22 fantasy points. He has now been targeted 6 or more times in 5 of his last 6 games, and scored double-digit fantasy points in 5 of the last 6 as well. So Russell Gage is definitely a great add, in my opinion, and he gets a pretty decent matchup this week against the Panthers. After that, we have Devonta Parker, rostered only 52% of leagues, week 13. They are on bye this upcoming week, but he is still somebody that I would love to stash. They have a pretty solid end-of-season schedule as well for the fantasy playoffs when they return for week 15. Hauled in 5 passes on 5 targets for 62 yards and 11.2 fantasy points. He has a 23% target share on the season. He's averaging 8.6 targets per game and has seen at least 6 targets or more in all 6 games that he's played. And the remaining schedule is the Jets, the Saints, and the Tennessee Titans. So all really good matchups for an offense that's really starting to come together as of late. And we're going to have to see what happens with Jalen Waddle. He did leave that game with an injury. So, if that's any sort of, long-term effect there, hopefully he's ready to go off bye, because that would be a shame because he's looked great. But that would be even better things for Devonta Parker. But Devonta Parker, if it's available anywhere, definitely deserves to be added. And then from there, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is somebody that I really want to add. Rostered only 18% of leagues. Has seen 19 targets in each of the last 2 games that he had played before their bye. And he also has an average depth of target of 19.4. And whenever you pair that with, one of the best deep ball passers that's ever played in Aaron Rodgers, that is a nice combination. And so I do think that him being the number 2 wide receiver and really in a great matchup next week against the Bears, who are allowing about 24.3 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I'm about that life. And the remaining schedule is Chicago at Baltimore, who give up a ton of deep balls, Cleveland and Minnesota to round out the fantasy playoffs. So I like MVS, and I think he is a solid kind of weak wide receiver 4 type moving forward. And then I have the Lions wide receivers, Josh Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Josh Reynolds has seen 13 targets in the last 2 games, 4 receptions on 7 targets and 69 yards for 10.9 fantasy points today. He appears to be one of the Goff's favorite targets. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's just a little bit tougher for me to trust. Yes, he had 11 receptions on 12 targets, 486 yards, but he is definitely the underneath target here. They're just peppering him with those short intermediate routes. I think some of that had to do with the fact that DeAndre Swift was out, and that's why they were using him in that way. But he was one of the top fantasy producers this week. But I just don't know if you can trust him moving forward. He's only seen more than 6 targets once since week 7. So I think he's just a little bit tougher to trust. But Josh Reynolds is starting to carve out a role as being a decent wide receiver 4 kind of flex option moving forward. And then from there, KJ Osborne is definitely a name that we should be looking at. Saw 7 targets today with Adam Thielen, who left, I think, after the first drive of the game with an ankle injury. And it's going to be really hard for him to return. They play Thursday Night Football. And so I doubt that he's going to be able to make it back for this time. So he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver going up against the Steelers. We know the Steelers' pass defense is not great. Their secondary is very banged up. And so I think KJ Osborne makes for a really solid kind of wide receiver 3/flex option this week with Adam Thielen being out. So give me KJ Osborne there if he is available. He is widely available. Next up, I have Kendrick Bourne. They play Monday Night Football. he's actually pretty surprising. Only rostered in 40% of leagues, but only has a 14% target share, but is 33rd in fantasy points per game with 42 catches, 623 and 5. But he's 18th in yards per route run and 11th in yards after the catch on the season. So he's been super efficient with the opportunity he's been given. So Kendrick Bourne, if he's sitting out there, I don't mind adding him as well. I think he should be rostered in far more than that, especially with what he's been able to do on somewhat of limited touches. Next up are some guys for me that are kind of, I don't want to say more stash options. Donovan Peoples-Jones, absolutely love him. Only rostered 9% of leagues. He is coming off bye. It's the number 2 wide receiver on the Browns. Yes, this is a run-first offense, but I think he's shown some promise. We've seen him drops. He has a 26-point performance. He has a 16-point performance. He's playing around 75% of the snaps. He's returning from injury. So I like adding Donovan Peoples-Jones. And hopefully with this bye week they're coming off of, that this will give Baker some time to heal. And then you have the Saints wide receivers, Tre'Quan Smith. I continue to talk about him. His matchups are only going to get better moving forward. He should have had a better week than he did this past week, but he saw 7 targets, 2 for 15. But Taysom Hill missed him on a wide open touchdown in the fourth quarter. Should have easily scored, but missed him on that. But he's seen 5 or more targets in every game since week 9. He's a bit boom or bust, but he has a decent floor with the amount of targets that he's seeing. Deontay Harris rostered in 16% of leagues, 4 on 8 targets, 96 yards and a score. But I think he's going to be much more of a harder option to trust, even in a great matchup against the Jets. And then you have Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, rostered in 13% of leagues, saw 6 targets week 12 for 25 yards and a score. But the week prior, he also saw 8 targets on 7 receptions and 107 yards. Gets a favorable matchup against the Jags and the Steelers over the next 2 games for Nick Westbrook. And Julio Jones should come, or could be back for this game. And if he is, I think that would just help this offense even more. I think Nick Westbrook is locked in as the number 2 wide receiver right now. And A.J. Brown is not expected back to at least week 16. So there's some, and then the rest of the guys on here just kind of, I don't really have any great, I think Deshaun Jackson's very boom or bust. Laviska Shenault, you just can't trust him. That Jaguars offense is so damn bad. And then you have some deep league guys, Brian Edwards, Josh Palmer, Terrace Marshall, all those guys. I don't know if you can trust any of them on a week-to-week basis, but if you're in like a 12, 16 team league, maybe or a 14 or 16 team league, I think you could look at them.
Speaking of guys you probably can't trust, let's go over to the tight ends for week 14. The obvious guy here to add is Tyler Conklin. Kev, like you were saying with KJ Osborne, obviously we don't know what's going to happen with Adam Thielen's ankles. It's sprained right now, but we still don't have any kind of timeline on him. But he did see a season high season high 9 targets in this game against Detroit because of Adam Thielen leaving and because of the Vikings playing from behind this entire game against Detroit. So he's an option here. Gerald Everett, a guy probably not going to be able to trust, but he has quietly seen 27 targets over the past 4 games. So he's an option there if you are desperate. Evan Ingram, I mean, he's been super disappointing, especially given the good spots he's been in, the opportunities he's had, but with how gross the tight end landscape is, beggars can't be choosers. And the upcoming schedule is worth streaming. He has seen at least 5 targets the past 3 weeks. Gets the Chargers, Dallas, Philly, and Chicago through the end of the fantasy season. And the last guy, just here to mention, Ricky Seals-Jones. We just got the news actually right before we were about to jump on that it looks like Logan Thomas is going to be out for the season with ACL and MCL injuries. And I checked because I just wasn't sure. Ricky Seals-Jones did get in limited practices all week last week, so he should be getting close to returning, but he would be another name there to definitely pay attention to if he's available and if he's able to play in week 14.
And I do want to mention really quickly just a couple of streaming options. I think Seattle versus Houston this week, as far as defense is concerned, I think that would be one that you would definitely look at. In Tennessee against the Jaguars, and then Carolina, if anybody happened to drop them because they were on bye, I think all make a lot of sense for streaming options this week.
Yeah, and we did have Alexis in the Discord ask about streaming defenses for the playoffs. And I thought that was a really good idea. So I'll be dropping a video later this week, just looking at defenses specifically for the playoffs that we could look to either pick up and hold through the playoffs, or maybe they have 2 out of the 3 weeks that are interesting. So shout out to Alexis for bringing that up, and like I said, I'll be dropping that this week. But That is going to wrap it up for the first look at the Week 14 waiver ads. Speaking of the Discord, you can click the link below to join that. Always popping off in there. Any other suggestions you guys have for content, we are all ears because we're trying to do this to make this the best possible content for you all. So hopefully you got that dub this week. Keep paying attention. Playoffs around the corner. Got to get those ships. Talk to you soon.